Another day, another episode of transfer talk and grinding through the remaining hours of the transfer window, with Arsenal still awaiting an agreement with Mikel Merino, with Arsenal still trying to sell Eddie Nketiah, but with some interesting news to talk through in this morning's Arsenal transfer show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal Transfer Show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you as always for joining me and making this a part of your morning routines. Good morning to those joining us live in the chat box. Good morning to Martin and Carlton, Knowledge, Jakob, Chanor, James, Ryan. We've got Amira, Answer, Damien, Jose, Paul Harris, Silky, Stephen, Edison, Zakukovi. We've got Stuart, Chris, Barry, Rowan, Adegoke, Errol, and plenty more of you guys and girls as well. Thank you to you all for tuning in. It is incredibly appreciated, and thank you for doing so. And if you could drop a like on the video and help us on our way to reaching 1K every single day on the channel, it really does help us out. So, yes, get pressing that like button. Right. Shall we kick off today's show? Well, first of all, saying thank you to AlphaMod for being a member now for 5 months. Fantastic support on the channel. Much appreciate that. But I want to jump into today's stories because there is a few to talk through. We've got some Sherlocking to do, some work to do to try and work some stuff out. And we start with Arsenal actually having made a signing. Jonas Eidevall's Arsenal Women's have added Rosa Kafaji to the Arsenal side. She's a forward who played previously for a BK Häcken. She scored 17 goals in 39 games. She's only 21 years of age, and of course joins the club who lost Vivian Miedema and have been in need of adding a forward to the club, and they've now signed that forward. So an exciting young player coming into the sides, and we'll wish her all the best and hope that she can deliver plenty of goals for Arsenal next season. Good to see, of course, a real push, a continuation to push for these younger players to help, with the long-term vision of the team as well. But hopefully this is going to be a good sign. She's already a full Swedish international, scored a goal in 9 caps for Sweden as well. So, yeah, plenty to be excited about there. Now, a slightly change of tune to a good story in some ways, a reality-hitting story in others. Arsenal have confirmed that 24 supporters have been given bans ahead of this new season. Reason for these bans are to do with abusive and discriminatory behavior. Of the bans that were given to stadium offences, these included 10 for assault, 5 for tragedy chanting, 2 for offensive gestures, 2 for racism, 1 for homophobia, and 1 for sexual assault. While there was also 3 bans given to offences committed online, 1 for racism, 1 for anti-Semitism, and 1 for the sending of abusive messages. A statement from Arsenal read that a threat matrix was activated to monitor social media channels to support the club in detecting and reporting content targeting Arsenal's players and coaching family. We work closely with Signify, to identify and unmask abusive accounts. And this season, 2 members were identified using the technology, of course, of the likes of Signify, and banned for online abuse. This is really, really good. This is a really good thing because not only are fans, of course, being identified in the Arsenal stadium for their abusive behavior, in some cases, some really horrific actions as well, but supporters are also being identified for their actions online. And I will give you the message of if you fans do witness any form of offensive behavior, you can report it using the anonymous See Something, Say Something service. If you text FOUL to 67777, together with a description of the incident and the location where it is taking place in the stadium, such as a block, row, and seat number. The service obviously protects supporters' anonymity should they feel uncomfortable speaking to stewards publicly. So if you're in the stadium, if you're at games, and you witness any of these types of incidents such as racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, sexism, assault, tragedy chanting, any of this stuff, you can anonymously report it. Of course, it is investigated and needs the evidence, of course, and there's plenty of cameras to check these sorts of things. But, it is a really positive thing that the club are actioning this and are implementing technology as well to help not only look in the stadium for these perpetrators, but also are putting in place technology to find people who online who go to games and have memberships can be identified for what horrible actions they've committed. I should say, though, that these fans have been given bans ranging between 1 and 3 years, because it's not just about banning and cancelling people. That's not what this is about. The opportunity to respond to their and kind of owning up to their mistakes, but also show a willingness to be educated on this as well. So, for instance, those fans that have been found to have committed certain actions in the stadium have received bans for them will be offered a one-to-one education program through Kick It Out. And by completing those one-to-one education programs, fans can actually reduce the length of their bans to the stadium as well. So it's really important, I think, that message is out there, because if you just say, oh, you're banned for life, you're not helping, you're not improving anything, you're not providing the opportunity for people to change, which is definitely something that should happen. You should offer the opportunity to, allow people to change and to own up to their actions, and also change their mindset and their lives. And if you don't do that, you're not improving anything. So I think that's also a really good point of the message to come out. Two, moving into specific football news again, background, full circle. Brooke Norton-Cuffy. We talked about this briefly yesterday, but just to confirm it in today's stories, that Brooke Norton-Cuffy has joined Genoa in a £3.5 million deal. This is split evenly into add-ons and the initial guaranteed fee as well. So very, very good. I think this deal, because a player that had no senior competitive appearances at all for Arsenal, getting more than £3 million potentially as well, after some loans that were okay. There weren't huge successes. They were just okay. Arsenal getting in money for one of their youth players, pure profit on the books. Again, decent. That's, £7.5 million for him and Mika Bireth this summer already. And we hope that Charlie Patino will bring in some money before the window closes, but there's no update on him at this point in time. Now, Arsenal's players completed the media day yesterday. You probably saw a lot of these images going around online, where they're obviously standing in front of a lot of the Arsenal artwork and the banners and things like this. However, yesterday evening, there was a real feeling of kind of Sherlocking, of trying to work out who and who wasn't present on this media day. And the absence of Eddie Nketiah initially raised a lot of kind of question marks surrounding whether or not, or why Eddie Nketiah wasn't there. Now, this morning, if you go back into Getty Images, you can actually see Eddie Nketiah has taken part in a section of the media day. That said, what Eddie Nketiah doesn't appear to have been included in is the images where you can see kind of this artwork behind the players. You can see here Miles Lewis-Skelly, Aidan Heaven, and Ethan Nwaneri involved in that. And if you look at, I've looked at plenty of other players. I'm talking about, I've looked at Reece Nelson, like players that are being linked with moves this summer. Reece Nelson's got an image in front of all the Arsenal artwork. Jakub Kiwior has got images in front of the Arsenal artwork. The only other player that I've so far seen that doesn't have an image taken in front of some kind of like the backing is Aaron Ramsdale. And of course, Aaron Ramsdale is being heavily linked with an exit from the club as well. Now, I don't know when the images were taken specifically in the new kit. I don't know if the images taken where they stand behind the grey backing was done when the kits were released ages ago and have now just been uploaded, or whether or not they were also done on the same day as the players' pictures in front of the Arsenal media kind of backgrounds. But it's very interesting indeed that these players are and are not being included in certain things. So we are going into some some detective areas here to see if that's got any kind of indication of what's going on. But these three in particular, Lewis-Skelly, Heaven, and Nwaneri being included in the senior setup is obviously a big suggestion the club clearly see these guys as having a future in the senior setup and will get opportunities this season, which is also a big hint of that. So some interesting things to take from the media day. Arteta, of course, also was interviewed by Sky. You can watch the whole interview over on Sky, which is, of course, available over there. He talks about, of course, that no one really setting as higher standards for themselves as they are. They are setting the standard for Arsenal going into the forthcoming season, and that, no matter what the scrutinizers or the critics are saying, they are the ones setting the standard. They are the ones saying they're not satisfied with finishing second and they want to win the league. Now, moving into specific transfer stuff, Wojciech Szczesny has left Juventus and is now a free agent going into the last couple of weeks of the window. This has, of course, led to a number of people suggesting that maybe Arsenal should consider having a look at Szczesny should, of course, Arsenal sell Aaron Ramsdale during the window, or allow Aaron Ramsdale to leave maybe on a short-term deal on a loan, and then you bring in Szczesny for a year deal to cover off his loan exit. But I'm not sure about this. I think emotions obviously kind of taking over for a lot of people. He's a very likable character. I like Wojciech Szczesny a lot. But there has obviously always been question marks about his distribution. And while he's a good goalkeeper, I don't know necessarily if he stylistically fits into what we're doing. That said, if we do end up allowing Ramsdale to leave on loan, it might be smart just to take him back for a single season to cover off that loan departure of Ramsdale. It should be said, this is a guy that was starting for Juventus for several seasons, successively, and took on the role from Gianluigi Buffon, of course. So he's still highly appreciated, but he is in the latter stages of his career now. But the headline story to discuss before we go to part two is that Arsenal are considered to be around 10 million euros, according to Miguel Delaney of The Independent, off of Real Sociedad's estimated price for the Spanish international. Suggestions are that they want 35 million euros, which is about 30 million pounds. And suggestions are that Arsenal are willing to offer around 25 million euros for the player. So there is a gap between the two clubs in terms of valuations about supposedly what one club is willing to offer. And again, I know that fans will turn around and say, just pay the money. It's 7-8 million quid. Just pay it. Get the deal done. But again, it's so important to stress that Arsenal are looking to do business on their terms. They have done that successfully over the last 3 summers to put them in a bracket of clubs that are performing really well against the market value of the players that they have signed. And they have managed to get into the position that they have got to by being shrewd in the market, by, staying and complying within those restrictions that exist. And they do that by doing business on their terms. That's why, yes, sometimes they'll go over what they maybe want to pay for somebody like Declan Rice because they know there's guarantees about it. But other players where there are more question marks, more risks associated with these deals, it is important that Arsenal don't overspend, because as we've mentioned in the last week or so, we do know that Chelsea have overspent on estimated market values by more than 300 million euros. Arsenal, meanwhile, have done so underspending around 30 million euros respective to these estimated market values of players. So, yeah, it's really interesting. But I still feel like this deal will eventually happen, but it might go down to the wire. We're going to have to wait and see. Right, let's go to part two and your questions right after this. You thought I forgot, but I didn't, because there's no way that you should ever forget about using NordVPN as your chosen VPN service for this forthcoming season, because it does give you the superpower to change your geolocation online. You can hop to anywhere else in the world that NordVPN, of course, covers. And if you go to nordvpn.com/Gooner, you can get yourself a significant discount off a 1 or a 2-year plan with 4 months extra thrown in free on top of that 2-year deal with 20 gigabytes of eSIM data as well. And a 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not happy with the service for whatever reason. VPNs are important for keeping yourself safe and secure online, and there's no point chucking in yourself into the risk of getting a free one. It's a thing that you should invest in and be sure on a trusted service, of which Nord, of course, is one of the world's most well-known VPN services globally today. Go down to the description, go to nordvpn.com/Gooner and get yourself that discount. Right, this is part 2 of the show where we, of course, tackle your questions and more. So we're going to jump into the chat box now and tackle some of these questions. So let's scroll up in the chat, shall we? And tackle some of these. TJ asks, is Sociedad leaking to Delaney to try and win the PR war of very average? Amberley says, no, don't just pay any amount of money. He has a year left on his contract and only wants to come here. We have all the power in this deal. You're absolutely right, mate. Jay says he's getting a bit frustrated now. I'm really shocked we haven't strengthened beyond just the defense so far. Of course, fans are starting to get a little bit agitated, and I empathize with you. I really do. I want to see Arsenal strengthen as much as you do. And if we don't bring in, a midfielder and a forward between now and the end of the window, I'm going to be disappointed. I am going to be disappointed, and I hope that is something that we're able to do. Logan says, have you heard anything about the new rules coming to the Premier League this season? And do you think it might affect the game? It's not something I've really done any research or looking into. Shall we have a look? I think there's an article I probably can find. New Premier League substitution rules in 24-25. So there will be a change to in-game warm-ups for substitutes this season. As teams are now allowed to make 5 substitutions per game, the Premier League will be increasing the amount of players permitted to warm up at the same time. From this campaign onwards, 5 players will be allowed to go through their paces on the sidelines rather than just the usual 3. That change has been made to correspond with the 5 substitutions that can be made. So there you go. You can have 5. You can have 5 substitutes now warming up down the touchline. There's also another one about added time. So last season, when a goal was scored, match officials would add on the time that was taken before the restart. But now, during this campaign, they won't do that straight away. Instead, they will allow 30 seconds for the teams to return to their playing positions and restart play before then adding on any time. 30 seconds has been deemed a natural amount of time for players to get back into position and restart the game. So it means that after that time, the officials will begin totting up the additional time that they will add on to the end of the game. During the 23-24 campaign, this is an article from TalkSport, by the way, there was an easily noticeable increase in stoppage time at the end of Premier League games. However, top flight Chiefs are expected a significant drop this season due to this change. The rule switch is one of 3 that have been made ahead of the season. So, effectively, teams will be allowed 30 seconds after a goal is scored to celebrate, and after 30 seconds, then referees will start to add on time, which means that whatever happens with a goal, 30 seconds is what it's going to be. So that takes 30 seconds off of each goal, but they're expecting it to go down. Some people are saying this is too little amount of time to allow in this case, but I think that if they're expecting the extra time to go down, then maybe it's, a positive thing. Nikki says, how do you think Gyökeres would fit into the team style of play? And if we were to sign him, would we play a 2-striker formation with Havertz and Gyökeres? I'd be doubtful. I think that obviously he would come in and initially be on the bench actually for Arsenal and then would work his way gradually into the Arsenal team depending upon the performances that he puts in on the bench and, of course, in the starts that he gets as well. He doesn't necessarily come in and start straight away for Arsenal. People always assume that when you sign a new player, they just come in and start. They don't. That doesn't really tend to happen unless they've had a full pre-season in particular to be able to do that. And at this stage, you rarely ever see that being the case. I think that with Gyökeres, he fits into the style that he is obviously a physically imposing forward, so he fits into that aerial presence that we've really added to the team of late as well. But also, of course, he is a good finisher. He's got speed about him, and he can collaborate. He got plenty of assists last season for Sporting, so that also leans into what Arteta tends to like in centre forwards. Tizer says, do you think that fans need to calm down about incomings? I believe there is some hard negotiation going on for players. We don't want to overpay Chelsea or undersell, especially if a player wants to move to us. I think that fans are entitled to feel how they feel, but if you're going to lose your head before the window is over, I wouldn't recommend that too much. You might hurt yourself. But I would obviously recommend that you wait until the window closed before we then finally make kind of that final judgment on where the window's at. I keep getting asked questions like, what would you rate the window if it closed today? And I'm like, but it's not closing today. So I can give you an answer, and I think I'd probably give you a 5 or 6 out of 10 max. But it doesn't close today. So it's like kind of a meaningless question. Roy says, Tom, is it luck or coincidence that Arsenal attacked the North Bank end of the Emirates in the second half of games? It's not coincidence. It's not coincidence, or it's not luck. Arsenal, of course, tends to favour. They obviously, when they come out, they tend to favour shooting towards the clock end in the first half because that's the end where the away fans are. And then the second half, they prefer to be attacking down the other end where the entire section, of course, is just Arsenal fans. And they expect to be dominating games in the second half. So if they're chasing the game, they're chasing a goal. They want the roar of those supporters. Now, I guess you could argue that as Arsenal have become more dominant and as Arsenal are winning more games, that maybe actually what you want is you to be defending with more of your supporters behind you. Because if you're winning more games and you're being more dominant in games, perhaps it is less likely that teams, of course, will be chasing a game against you. And actually, it gives the opposition maybe a slight advantage because then they're attacking the other end. So if you're actually in a winning position, let's say by a single goal against Man City with 5 minutes to go, wouldn't you rather that Man City were attacking the end where their fans aren't? So it's a really interesting question, but obviously it does tend to be that Arsenal want to be finishing the game attacking down the flanks towards their own fans, would be the argument. EK says, even though I'd not mind having Gyökeres, but bringing him would move Havertz to the bench, that would be a waste of money, in my opinion. Jalali says, let's remember our best assets are the ones that we currently own. Yes, we need more, but we have enough to go with the time being. And but we still must strengthen. Jack says, hi, Tom, with Osula going to Newcastle, do you think that they got him in because they know they're going to lose Isak next season? Of course, I don't think Newcastle are in any way planning for Isak's departure. They're looking to sign him up to a brand new contract. I don't think I'd read too much into them signing another centre forward because Callum Wilson, his situation obviously is, I believe, very open. I don't think he's moved yet, but there was a lot of suggestions that he was going to move from Newcastle. So I think it covers that off more than anything. Jim says, morning, Tom. Could I have the Discord link? I want to share some photos and videos of my visit to the Emirates. I will put the new Discord link into the community tab for our members after today's show, mate. Ashley says, morning, Tom. Adingra or Sané, the project or the finished article? We as Arsenal fans suffer with this, especially now with the expectation of winning titles. Love Sané, but also I love Adingra as well. I'd lean towards Sané because for me, Adingra, while I like his talent, I'm not sure how good he really is. You know, I've got question marks about him. Whereas Sané, I think, comes in as a shorter term option. And yes, he would cost a lot of money in terms of wages and potentially the transfer fee as well. But Arsenal need some injection of guaranteed quality for this season. And that's why we're after the likes of Merino, hopefully. But I'd also be looking at Sané as an option too. Lamar says, Ivan Toney. No, thank you. Kevin says, do you think there is any scope for Partey playing at right back this season? During that experiment, Partey had really good numbers. Possibly we could solidify the left side with Timber and Calafiori. It wasn't just Partey that had good numbers when he played at right back. Arsenal did too. I remember sitting in a Cotswolds Airbnb, actually, doing a show with you at the start of last season after the Fulham draw, where obviously the mood was very down and there was a lot of question marks after that game. But what we saw was actually an average statistical backing that there was reasons behind that. However, what I would say is that I don't think that will happen this season because I think that was in part a lot to do with Gabriel's situation, which promoted that situation to move Partey to right back. So Nicholas says, with the allowed spending looking like it's going to tighten again next season and again the year after, 10 million today will be worth more than it is now. And I guess that brings us back to the Nketiah side of things. I saw a story yesterday. Actually, I think it was David Ornstein that reported this story about Fulham making a bid for Joachim Andersen. Now, supposedly, Crystal Palace want around £40 million for Joachim Andersen. Now, I don't know about you, but the 28-year-old, of course, who has, I'm just checking his contract at Palace. His contract runs out in 2 years' time in 2026. Now, Arsenal are asking for £27 million, about 30 million euros for Eddie Nketiah. And it's when you see these types of deals where you're seeing like Joachim Andersen being asked for this amount of money, when I'm like, why on earth are anybody ever scrutinising Arsenal for asking for this amount of money for Nketiah when you see deals like this go down? You know, I don't tend to like comparing players that have moved because all the contexts are different. But I think the context in this scenario actually is quite a good comparison because a 28-year-old, 2 years left on his deal, not homegrown, going from one Premier League team to another, and Palace want 40 million quid. So I do think that's, and I know that Anderson plays week in, week out for Palace, but Nketiah, I believe, for a club like Palace would also be playing week in, week out. So I think that's probably a reason as to probably a good comparison to make as to why Arsenal are asking for what they're asking for. Troy says, Tom, you cannot be looking at our current team and saying, yes, we are winning something without change. I mean, Troy, I'm looking at this current team that we've got. I'm seeing that it's record-breaking ability compared to anything Arsenal previously done. I'm seeing it finishing just 2 points off probably the best Premier League side in terms of quality and manager combined that we've ever seen. And if you're telling me that you don't see after the end of last season Arsenal is not a side capable of winning trophies, I don't think you ever will. So it's very simple for me, that. Vanaduti says, how did Chelsea manage to offer Palmer a contract extension which keeps him at the club for 9 years? I thought the ruling on contract lengths had changed. And that the contract lengths ruling has changed, but it's nothing to do with the length of contracts that are being offered. All that has changed is that clubs can only amortize transfers over 5 years of those contracts. So Palmer's, of course, initial deal, which I think was, I want to say 8 years. Obviously, that then reduced to 7 after one season, has now been extended to 9 to 2033. What I would say is that, of course, the 5 years, so I think it was what, £45 million. So 5 years of that transfer fee is what the amortization is. So if the deal was £45 million, that means that they are paying. That means on the books it will show up as 9 million over the first 5 years. That's how it will show up. So it can't be spread over the 8-year contract, whatever he signed when he joined. It can only be over that amount of time. Now, I think this is mental. Like, without question, these types of deals for the players they've signed, the 8-year contracts, the 9-year contracts, they are mad. I mean, if you look at, for instance, Arsenal giving an extension to Tomiyasu. Tomiyasu's extension was a 1-year extension. His deal was running out in 2026. It now runs out in 2027. This includes an option to extend going to 2027. It's worth bearing in mind. It was 25 plus 1. It was 20. Now it's 26 plus 1. Now, we gave him just a 1-year extension. When you think about, we've given multi-year deals to Ben White and Odegaard and Gabriel and Saliba and Saka and Martinelli, all these players that we've given extensions to. The reason why we didn't give that extension in the same way to Tomiyasu is because of his injury issues. He's got persistent injury problems, and that makes him far more likely that if we ever get into a situation where we're struggling to sell, that his contract runs out and we can just see him leave on a free without needing to worry about him taking up space on the wage bill for the foreseeable future. And if you are in a position like Chelsea and you've now committed 8-year, in some cases like Palmer now, 9-year contracts to players, what if they have a significant injury problem that rules out those players for the foreseeable future and they never return in the same way ever again? They're going to be screwed. It's maddening. And if anybody does end up taking over that role, if something happens with the Todd Bowley ownership and they want to sell up, whoever takes on those contracts, goodness me, it's looking a bit crazy. JP says Arsenal ban fans, but nothing will happen to Enzo from Chelsea and others for doing the same thing at a worldwide level. Apparently, there is room for racism and homophobia. JP, I think you raise a powerful point. We did talk about the Enzo Fernandez situation, of course, when it happened in quite a lot of detail, but it's a really, really interesting argument. Very interesting argument indeed. Sophie's in the chat. Morning, TGT gang. Good to see Sophie here. Paul says, good morning, Tom and TGT Global Community. I'm late, so I'm adding the like and then watching on catch-up. Have a good day, everybody. Steve, of course, morning to you. Baron says, Tom, has Zinni and Partey kept the haters' mouths shut? I mean, their performances in pre-season have been mixed. I think it started off a little bit slower, but obviously the last 2 performances against Lyon and against Bayer Leverkusen, they've looked much better. Zinchenko in particular has actually been very impressive. Very, very impressive indeed. Jason says, hi, Tom. Per discussion about compensation for academy players yesterday, shouldn't this been agreed prior to players moving? No, and it rarely does, Jason. Compensation fees are rarely agreed, because player contracts end, and sometimes players will be free agents before they then sign for new clubs over a period of time. So, no, Jason, it's not always the case that players will agree those compensation fees. And actually, a player's contract might end. They might go and then they go somewhere else after, say, a month. That club that they have gone to may not have been in the conversation. towards the end of their time with Arsenal. So no, Jason, it doesn't work that way. If clubs can't come, and someone asked me this yesterday, if clubs can't come to an agreement on a player's value of compensation, I believe it goes to a tribunal and is then settled legally, and there is no kind of challenges or appeal process, I don't think, in those. Whatever the tribunal sets as what the compensation is for those players, that is what the club has to pay. So it's a really interesting kind of side of the sport. And says Tom, just like with Havertz was a surprise last summer, I'm intrigued what surprise is waiting for us. Hasn't been mentioned so far during this window. Jack says, what's your thoughts on signing Sterling? Not great, to be honest. I'm not that keen, Jack, on signing Raheem Sterling. PW says, I agree this team is very strong, Tom, but will be as strong as our bench as injuries will happen. Hence, as you say, an attacker in Merino is needed, plus a backup for Saka. I don't know, a plus a backup for Saka. I think the attacker, of course, is part of that. One midfielder, one forward is what I'm looking for between now and the end of the window, and that forward is a winger. So that would be the cover and multiple role competition, of course, in that forward line. Tizer says, do you think that there is any truth in the links with Arsenal and the Brighton winger adding Grant? I mean, I think there's suggestions that Arsenal have looked at him, but what is worth pointing out is that Arsenal scout hundreds of players. So just sometimes what happens is that you find out that Arsenal have looked at a player, they've maybe gone and scouting, and now someone's got a bit of information about that and they brought it out. It doesn't mean that Arsenal that he's ahead of like a lot of other players in a list. It doesn't mean he's even the priority option in a list. It just means that Arsenal have looked at him. That's the problem with the transfer window, and that's the problem with the sporadic reporting, if you like, is that we only see a small chunk of what's actually on the surface, whereas the iceberg example shows that beyond the surface there is actually a much larger world that's going on behind the scenes that we have no idea, and fans have no idea, but journalists will have a bit more indication on things, but even we don't as well. Craig says, Tom, are you hyped and believe Edu's statement regarding surprise transfers? I'm not leaning too much into that. I know that James Green, a good friend of mine and on the show, and Sophie's as well, mentioned it on Sky, saying that a friend, or rather a fan, I think it was, said that they'd spoke to Edu and he said, you'll be happy, whatever he said. I just struggle to really get on board with that as a something to really jump on. So no. Kim says, not the hospital records, T. Yes, mate. Hospital records, absolutely. I've been wearing the Shogun ones recently, but I'll give some love to the hospital. Boston says Brooke Norton-Cuffy leaves Arsenal, undergoes his medical. Yes, Boston. We've been talking about this. Jim says, I'm convinced that AFTV have an insider knowledge to the Arsenal scam. Chris says, is moving Eddie more of a necessity because we can't shift others? Keeping him as a potential third choice with Jesus' record isn't the worst case scenario if we raise the funds elsewhere. As I've said before, Chris, it's not about raising funds. Like, that's not what this is about. And it's not even necessarily about space either. I've written a piece this morning which actually goes through where Arsenal's squad is at the moment in terms of homegrown players, in terms of non-homegrown players. And if you actually have a look, Arsenal are currently on 23 players. And that includes Kieran Tierney, by the way. So it could go down to 22 if Kieran Tierney leaves. Now, this, of course, doesn't include some of the youngsters like Ethan Nwaneri, Miles Lewis-Skelly, because they don't actually have to be registered because they're under the age of 21. Arsenal currently have 14 non-homegrown players. Again, that includes Kieran Tierney. So that could drop to 13 non-homegrown players if indeed we choose not to register Kieran Tierney in this season's list, which gives you a potential 3, maybe 4 more spaces for non-homegrown players. In terms of homegrown players, Arsenal currently have 9. We have David Raya, Aaron Ramsdale, William Saliba, Ben White, Declan Rice, Bukayo Saka, Reece Nelson, Eddie Nketiah, and Gabriel Martinelli. They're all homegrown players. So we're actually in a really healthy position squad-wise for what we can add. There's not pressures on needing to move a player on. So those people that think we have to move Eddie on before we can sign, it's not accurate. At the start of the window, of course, Arsenal are very keen on Benjamin Sesko, and were keen, there was a keenness in the player, and would have, if indeed that he'd shown more of a willingness to join Arsenal rather than choosing to stay at RB Leipzig, they would have done that regardless of Eddie Nketiah's situation. So, the whole space thing, it doesn't work because there is space in the squad, and money-wise, Arsenal don't have PSR pressures anywhere near as what they did last summer, because obviously last summer we did loads of business. We spent 105 million on Declan Rice, 65 on Havertz, 38 on Timber, and then obviously got a loan for David Raya, and we've not spent anywhere near as much. And actually, we've made some good money in this window for Smith Rowe. There's an expectation that we might get more money in, and of course, we've started to make more money in other areas as well. Mikel Merino, Brooke Norton-Cuffy, they've brought in pure profit, which looks good on the books as well. So there's not financial pressure. It's just the actual state of the market that's the issue. That's the biggest problem. It's that Arsenal don't necessarily see the standout, obvious candidates for them right now. This is, whenever I say these things, some people say, oh, you're making excuses. No, I'm just telling you what the reality is. For me, I think it will be really disappointing if Arsenal don't add a midfielder and a forward before the window ends. And if we get to the end of the window, I will be saying I'm really disappointed that we didn't add a forward, and there's a chance it could come back to bite us. And they may not. They probably should have found one. I'm explaining to you that I just don't think that that's the other case. That there's that I don't think that Arsenal at the moment foresee an obvious candidate, and maybe that's the reason why they don't. Because signing players for the sake of signing players is it. Here we go. We might have to get the bingo card out. Ryan says, Tom always makes excuses for the club. If we sign nobody else, he will stick up for them. It's funny because I just said, didn't I, that if we get to the end of the window and we don't sign anyone, I'm going to be disappointed. And I think that the window will be a failure if we don't. So good timing, Ryan. Yeah, you kind of timed that pretty poorly, mate. Kwame says, look, man, to our fans, Edu isn't serious and you trust him. That's up to you. Edu isn't serious. Okay. Won the Best Director Award in 2023, has signed a squad of players that have now risen to establish themselves as title challengers, despite the fact that all you critics never thought Arsenal would get anywhere close to here under this manager, has managed to beat the likes of Manchester City to huge signings like Declan Rice, has signed players that you never thought we'd even be looking at, like Calafiori this summer. And of course, despite all of people's whinging and whining about the likes of Jorginho, who put in a man of the match performance as we beat Liverpool at the Emirates last season, goodness me, yeah, he's not serious. He's just a joker. He comes into work, puts his little clown statue on his desk and thoughts, right, let's come up with some jokes for the Arsenal fans today. Yeah, Edu's not serious. My goodness gracious me. Ryan says, I did send this before you mentioned it, Tom. But Tom, Edu is one of the worst at selling players. You have to admit this, and we can critique him. I mean, who would you say is like, and we're looking at examples, Ryan, of kind of clubs that are better at selling than Arsenal. Okay. Now, often what we see is Liverpool are often used, aren't they, as an example of a club that are better at selling than us. Now, this summer, Liverpool have sold one player. They've bought none, by the way. They've sold Fabio Carvalho to Brentford in a £20 million deal with £7 million in add-ons. He played, I think, last season. Just having a quick look at his record. So I think he was on loan last season. He also had an excellent pre-season for Liverpool, scoring against Arsenal and scoring against Manchester United as well. But last season he was on loan at was he in the Bundesliga? He played he went to RB Leipzig last season, played some games for them, and then I think in the second half of last season he was with Hull and did very well, actually, in the Championship. Scored 9 goals, got 2 assists playing. So it's a goal contribution record of 1 in 2. They got 20 million up front, 7 million in add-ons. And Arsenal, meanwhile, with just over 500 minutes in 2 seasons, managed to get £34 million and a significant sell-on clause on top of that as well. It's to say that we are poor sellers, like we're one of the worst sellers. I mean, we've been better than Liverpool this summer in terms of selling. If we have a look at last summer in terms of selling as well, what Arsenal did, of course, they managed to get over £30 million for following Balogun, and they managed to get in over £20 million for Granit Xhaka. We also sold Matt Turner. I think we ended up making a profit, if I'm not mistaken, on Matt Turner as well. During that window, this page is loading for Arsenal's transfers. But if you look at Liverpool, in that other previous season, they sold Fabinho for around £40 million up front, and then they got Jordan Henderson out for about £10 million. Both of those were to Saudi sides, of course, inflated prices. But even then, Naby Keita left on a free. James Milner left on a free. Roberto Firmino left on a free. Oxlade-Chamberlain, who they spent £40 million on from us, left on a free. So Liverpool were kind of like put up there as this kind of pedestal of the best sellers. But actually, it doesn't correspond. Arsenal actually made more money in the market because they still sold Matt Turner, Pablo Mari, Austin Trusty as well, Rob Holding, and they got a loan fee for Kieran Tierney and Nuno Tavares and Marquinhos too. So, yeah, when we're saying Edu is one of the worst, and people often use Liverpool as kind of an example of a club that we should be looking to sell like, it doesn't work out as clearly cut as what people say. So yeah. Anyway, I can only continue to give evidence. That's all I can do. All I can give is the evidence. Let's go to Temi says Edu has flaws in the sense. I'm not going to disagree that Edu is. I'm not going to disagree that we have not sold well enough historically. That's not even up for debate. It's not even a debate. Arsenal have needed to improve in the market in terms of selling under Edu as the technical and now sporting director. They have had to improve. But what I would also say is that this summer, the same fans that have been battering Edu for not being good enough at selling want us to accept a fee that is below our valuation of one of our players for Nketiah and are desperate for him to go. So there is a contradiction there that doesn't really work out. And for that reason, it's not as clearly obvious to fans as I think it is. Kwame said earlier, Kwame, of course, who left a comment, actually joined our phone-in show for, I think it was 20 seconds or so, says, Tom, don't be upset by what I said. Do I look upset to you? I'm just explaining very calmly and consciously about why your point of view isn't accurate when you said Edu isn't serious. And I gave you facts and evidence as to the reasons why clearly he is a very serious sporting director that has been given awards for his actions as a sporting director, to which you say, Tom, don't be upset. Because that's what the smart people do. Anthony says, Tom, urgent. Demartio, Chelsea are decision makers giving green light for Victor Osimhen. Transfer deal. I mean, if any club was going to sign him, it was either going to be Chelsea or PSG, it felt like. So that seems like it's a match made in heaven. Adam says, Edu is serious. Because he isn't great at selling, doesn't take away from what he has done for the club. I wouldn't want any other man. Let's get behind the whole club. It's the start of the season. It's another great point. I mean, all the people that are really, pointed about Edu, I'm kind of curious to what, I'm curious as to what and who you would replace him with. I mean, look at Liverpool, right? Liverpool have brought in, who's the guy that Liverpool have just brought in? Is it Ashworth went to, it's Edwards, isn't it? Michael Edwards. Michael Edwards, when he went to Liverpool, fans were losing their minds. I mean, rival fans. When Michael Edwards went back to Liverpool, it was all, oh goodness, Liverpool are going to be in a position where they're going to be signing the best players again. They're going to be finding all the players that helped them get to a level where they were winning the Premier League and winning the Champions League. They've not signed one player. They've got a brand new manager and they've not signed one. Now, I think it's smart not to sign many when a new manager comes in personally, and especially when you've just taken over from a manager like Jurgen Klopp, should definitely keep the majority of the core group there. I think about Arteta, brought in three senior players when he first arrived, Willian, Gabriel, Partey. Two of those are still with us and still part of the main starting 11. I was expecting more, though. I was expecting them to at least do something. And of course, they've left it late and they've tried to move late for Martin Zubimendi and he's rejected them. So I kind of question people when they're like, where and when and who is coming in to replace Edu for you if you think he's, quote, not serious. Just think that was a little bit lacking. Paul says Arteta hasn't helped his price by not playing. Same with Ramsdale. Their value has dropped massively. Well, I mean, Eddie Nketiah received a bid of £23 million, which, Paul, a lot of people are saying we should have accepted. So if Eddie Nketiah's price has dropped massively and we've received a bid in the region of £23 million for him, which a lot of fans suggest we should have accepted, if his value dropped massively, what on earth was he before? When was he significantly, when was Paul for you, he massively worth more than £23 million? Because I've said before that I think minimum I want is 25, but I'd like 30. Always said minimum 25, would like 30. But Paul, what you're saying here is that Nketiah's value has dropped, quote, massively. So if indeed his value in the market at the moment is said to be £23 million, because that's the last bid that we've got, what was he worth at his peak? And when was that? When was that peak for you? Because I don't know what really has happened between whenever his peak was, when he was worth massively more than he's worth now, to have dropped, because his minutes haven't really diminished like hand over fist. They've not massively, to use your word, Paul, decreased compared to what we've seen previously with Eddie's usage on the pitch. So I'm struggling a little bit there with that, Paul. Tizer says, I have done. You have to, I think this is maybe in a response. You have to remember where he started from and who would come to us when we were terrible. He had to build from the bottom to reach where we are now, and some of you are still never happy. Ridiculous says, people do need to realize as well that some positions are not taught in universities, and no other sporting director will spill their entire know-how because it will make their own job much harder. Jim says, I'd like to point out that Edu brought us out of a terrible time with the club. Because he hasn't bought this mystery striker, he shouldn't shroud what he has done for the club. Hashtag King Edu. Damien says, if you can't be full of hope and excitement at this stage of the season, then you never will be. I pity your miserable lives. Damien. The first sentence, I was like, fair enough. The second sentence, I was like, goodness me, Damien. Really, woke up and chose violence this morning. Ryan says, you are a nice chap, Tom, but if someone doesn't agree with you, you put a condescending voice and speak like we're stupid. You will always win a debate as you have the microphone. Ryan, the irony of that comment is that I open the floor up all the time to people to come on the show. So when you say you will always win the debate because you have the microphone, it doesn't make any sense, because I literally invite people on to come and have a chat, to challenge my point of view. But they very, very rarely show up. And when they do, they tend out to be really nice people and actually have a really good conversation. But your comment doesn't make sense. If you think that I'm condescending, I'm sorry. I come across as sarcastic. I get that. I've always been that way. It's just who I am. But I do everything that I can to give you the platform as well to come on and challenge my point of view. I get battered and abused every single day on social media and online. I've done this for like 7 odd years, 9 years now. You know, if there isn't a slight edge to when I'm challenged on points of view that I come back with after 9 years of doing this, you know, I think I'd be pretty emotionless as a person. So you're going to have to accept that little edge. And I do balance it off by giving you the microphone and by offering you the chance to come on the show. But sadly, people never do. But Ryan, if you want to finish the debate, I've got 10 more minutes that I'm able to sit here. Let me know. I'll drop the chat. I'll drop the link in, and you can come on. That's just to Ryan, by the way, just for the point, just to kind of prove this point, as per. Amberly says, "What's that saying? Saying stupid things win stupid prizes." Kwame says, "What's our priority? The Premier League or the Cups? The priority is winning every game, mate. We should be looking to try and win every game. We should be aiming for the Premier League. We should be trying to win a trophy this season. We should be trying to go as far as we can and maybe win the Champions League as well. That's what Arsenal will be doing. Arsenal will not be prioritising a competition. They will be going after every game that they can." Albert says, "Tom being sarcastic? No way. it's inconceivable that would happen." Luke, Tom always bullied his listeners who don't have microphones. David says, "Fans need to relax and calm down." Steve says, "Yesterday alone, Tom begged for people to come on the show." I don't like begged, Steve. Encouraged is a better word. Encourage people to come on the show exclusively for those who opposed his view, no less. We had one. One came. Actually, no, that's unfair. Oki came on as well. And Elliot and Oki came on to challenge the point of view. And actually, Elliot, I think, took on board quite a lot of the points that I brought up. I think Oki as well was, we were very open to it and listening to one another. So, yeah, as I said, the Ryan, the invite is there for you specifically, just for you, because as you said, I always win the debate because I've got the microphone. Well, here I am handing you the microphone. So come out of the debate, is what I'm saying. Temi says, "I think £23 million is a good fee for Eddie. Why can't they accept it?" Because they don't value him at £23 million, Temi. They value him at a higher fee than that. And if we accept the lower fee, we are not doing what we should be doing to change the rhetoric surrounding this club. We are not here doing enough to change what we need to do. And so for that reason, that's why we're not accepting it. And we also know that there are others interested. There are other clubs interested. And for me, if you know that other teams are keen and you get an offer that's below what you want, you don't. You think about selling a house. Someone comes in with an offer for your house that's below your asking price, and you've had 5 other viewings, and you're told by your estate agent that other people are keen on your property. Do you accept the bid that comes in below your asking price? Because previously you've had houses that you've accepted bids for lower than your asking price, and people keep telling me you're not a very good property developer, mate. You keep buying these houses, or you keep developing these houses, and you keep accepting bids below what they're actually worth. You need to change that. New summer comes around. People come in, offer you below what you've wanted for your house. You've had 5 other viewings, and people are said to be keen beyond this person that's putting an offer. And then people are criticizing you for saying, oh, I think I'm going to accept that bid that's lower again. It doesn't make any sense, It doesn't stack up. Arsenal have to be strong on this. They have to be. Oki says, I had a great, respectful chat with Tom yesterday, who came on the show. I often don't agree with Tom's perspective, but I respect that he puts his argument forth in an articulate way. We all just want to win. And I appreciate that, Oki. That's very kind of you to say, because we don't agree on a lot of things. And if sometimes I come across as condescending or whatever, I apologize for that. Genuinely, I do. But it's a case of it's just a victim, not a victim, but it's just like a consequence of the environment. It's just a consequence of the environment. So it's you're going to have to build up something of a thick skin to do this job, and sometimes that leads to harsher or sometimes edgier responses than you may want to appreciate. We're not having a one-on-one conversation at the end of the day. There's 1,800 of people sitting in this watching this ugly mug right now. It's not the same as having a one-on-one conversation. So, yeah. But again, Ryan's kind of disappeared at this point, so which is a shame because there was the opportunity to prove that point, which hasn't been taken up. But you can't say that I don't offer the opportunity for people to come on the show and take the microphone, to use Ryan's own words. Let's go to King, who says, Rambo was valued as the most expensive keeper before we bought Raya. His value has definitely decreased because of playing time. Eddie going from second choice to 4th choice centre forward has an impact, but 25 million should be okay. That's just what I say. I think my minimum expectation for Eddie is 25 million. Rambo, his value has dropped. His value was always going to drop when David Raya came in, but we've got a better goalkeeper. Raya is a better goalkeeper than Ramsdale. The numbers support this. The record supports this. Raya is a better goalkeeper than Ramsdale. And because of that, we have improved in that area, And yes, Ramsdale's price has dropped because of that. But that's as a positive consequence of squad building. You're not going to be able to maintain the player's value, even if he played all of the Champions League games, which I personally thought he should have done. I thought he should have played the Champions League games last season. I thought he was good enough to, and I thought he was strong enough to be able to do that, and we wouldn't have seen enough of a drop-off. So there you go. Ryan says, I feel famous. Thanks, Tom. And that's all we got from Ryan. Ryan, you're not famous, but you do look a little bit silly. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate your time, as always. Have a fantastic day and enjoy your Tuesday. I'll be back with you, of course, bright and early tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to round up any more of the latest Arsenal news and to talk condescendingly to more of the haters. Have a fantastic Tuesday. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.